If giving birth in modern hospitals feels scary, try to imagine giving birth in the Middle Ages. No painkillers, no sterilization, no doctors, just merciless pain, infection risk, and a face-to-face battle with death. The story I'm about to tell you today will reveal just how much courage it took to become a mother in that era. Getting pregnant in the Middle Ages was essentially making an appointment with death. Women would start writing their wills as soon as they realized they were pregnant. I'm not joking. This was actually a common practice because 1 in 3 women died during childbirth or immediately after. Throughout pregnancy, women followed a special diet. But this diet had nothing to do with modern medicine. Hot foods were considered harmful to the baby, so cold ones were preferred. Eating fruit was forbidden because people believed it would make the baby too large. The result? Malnutrition and weak mothers. So if you lived in that era, how many children would you want to have? Write it in the comments. Now let's continue our journey through history. Now imagine when it's time to give birth. No hospital, no doctor, just midwives. Mostly elderly women with no medical training whatsoever. These women learned their skills based on oral tradition. The birth chamber was cold, damp, and dirty. Windows were kept closed because fresh air was believed to be harmful to mother and baby. The room contained these tools: dirty cloths, blunt knives, herbal mixtures, and prayer books. Yes, prayer books, because praying was considered more logical than medical intervention. When labor began, there was no such thing as painkillers. Instead, women were told, "This is the price of Eve's sin. You must endure it." The only relief method was bitter teas made from opium plants, but these were extremely rare. The birthing position was nothing like today's. Women had to stand, squat, or sit on a special chair. These chairs were known as birthing chairs and had a large hole in the middle. They looked like torture devices. What if the baby was in the wrong position? There were no modern C-sections, of course. The midwife would try to insert her hands and attempt to turn the baby. Whether her hands were clean didn't matter at all. The result? Horrific infections and often death for both mother and baby. The slightest complication during birth meant death. Excessive bleeding. The cure? Lift the woman's feet up and mumble magical words. An infection starting? The cure? Place rotting meat to draw out the bad humors. If the placenta didn't come out after the baby was born, the midwife would try to insert her hand. There were no sterile gloves, of course. This intervention with dirty hands usually resulted in sepsis and death. Noble women were slightly luckier. They had the opportunity to give birth in cleaner rooms with more experienced midwives. But what we call cleanliness just meant the room had been swept. Still, there was no concept of sterilization. These wealthy women also had access to imported spices and herbs that were supposed to ease labor. Cinnamon, ginger, and saffron were mixed into potions that cost more than a peasant's yearly income. Did they actually help? Not really, but at least the noble women felt they were doing something special. The birthing rooms of the wealthy were decorated with religious tapestries and had multiple midwives attending. Sometimes even a priest would be present. Not to help medically, but to perform last rites if things went wrong. This tells you everything about their expectations. Peasant women often had to give birth alone. Labor could start while working in the fields, and a woman might have to deliver her baby by herself under a tree. If they were lucky, a neighbor woman might assist, but usually, this person had no more knowledge than the mother herself. Rural women sometimes gave birth in barns, sharing space with animals. The irony, the animals probably had cleaner birthing conditions than the humans. At least animal stalls were regularly cleaned out. Even if the mother survived childbirth, the baby's situation wasn't much brighter. 50% of babies didn't even reach their first birthday. Infections, feeding problems, and diseases quickly resulted in death. The cleansing ritual for newborns was quite interesting too. The baby was washed with salt water, then tightly wrapped in cloths. This wrapping was so tight that the baby had trouble breathing. The logic? Medieval people believed that if babies weren't tightly bound, their limbs would grow crooked. Premature babies had virtually no chance of survival. There were no incubators, no special care, nothing. They were often just wrapped in wool and placed near a fire, hoping for the best. Most died within hours. If a baby appeared weak or sickly, some communities practiced exposure, essentially abandoning the child to die. This wasn't considered murder, but rather letting God decide. The harsh reality was that resources were so scarce that only the strong were worth investing in. Breastfeeding was another challenge. If the mother died during childbirth, finding a wet nurse was crucial but expensive. Poor families had to resort to animal milk or thin porridge, which often killed the baby due to digestive problems and malnutrition. When birth was over, the ordeal wasn't finished. The woman was considered unclean for 40 days and was forbidden to leave the house. During this time, there was no medical follow-up, just prayers and herbal mixtures. For those showing signs of infection, the treatment method was this: cauterizing wounds with red-hot iron. Yes, you heard right, they tried to cure infections by burning wounds with heated iron pieces. In that era, protective stones were tied to pregnant women's bellies. These stones were believed to protect the baby. Different stones had different powers: jasper for easy delivery, coral for protection against evil spirits, and amber for strength. During birth, garlic was hung in the room, various prayers were recited, and holy water was sprinkled. But the rituals didn't stop there. Family members would ring bells continuously during labor, believing the sound would drive away demons trying to harm the mother and child. The most interesting belief was this: during birth, all doors, windows, and drawers in the house were opened, because closed places were thought to prevent the baby from coming out. Imagine the poor woman shivering in a freezing room with everything wide open in the middle of winter. Some regions had even stranger customs. In parts of Germany, the father had to experience sympathetic labor by lying in bed and groaning alongside his wife. In France, pregnant women were encouraged to stare at beautiful paintings so their babies would be attractive. And in England, eating rabbit meat during pregnancy was believed to give the child a cleft lip. Astrology played a huge role too. The timing of birth was considered crucial. Certain planetary alignments could doom a child to a life of misfortune. If a baby was born during an unlucky time, some families would actually lie about the birth date to protect the child's future prospects. This is what giving birth was like in the Middle Ages. The hospital conditions we complain about today are genuine luxury compared to that era. Thanks to modern medicine, birth is no longer a matter of life and death, but a joyful experience. Can you imagine the courage of women who lived in that era? Dancing with death to bring children into the world. Perhaps this is why motherhood is considered so sacred. If you had lived back then, would you have dared to give birth in the Middle Ages? Share your thoughts in the comments.